Joining me today, PIX political reporter Henry Rosoff and Craig McCarthy, the City Hall Bureau Chief, the new City Hall Bureau Chief of the New York Post. Congrats on the new gig.
Congrats. Thank you.
So let's talk first and foremost, guys, the migrant crisis, right? That is the big talker. Mayor Adams has been focused on the federal government saying, give us some help in terms of locations, in terms of money. The governor saying, hey, we got a federal site, but no money.
She tried to put a brave face on. I was there for the press conference where an aide literally handed her a card and it said, we got the lease. First of all, the lease hasn't been finalized. There's a lot of details. And also there's a lot of deficiencies in that lease compared to what the state asked for. They asked for the state to pay for it. Excuse me, the federal government to pay for it. The state's now paying for it. They asked for about 7,500 beds. There's going to be maybe 2,000 beds. She says she hopes this is the beginning of sort of greasing the wheels, but there's not a lot of signs the feds are willing to go too much further.
In terms of money, locations, and then there's the work authorization issue as well, which is all to be continued and to be determined. But now we're seeing Mayor Adams really shift, and Deputy Mayor Isom, Craig, focusing on the state, going after the governor, saying, well, we need your help now. Can we get some more state locations and state aid to move migrants out? What are you seeing and hearing in terms of movement?
So last week there's been court filings in the right to shelter, which we've actually seen this all play out. Kind of the infighting has been actually playing out in court opposed to in public, where it's been very cordial and they've been thankful of each other. But in court filings, we've been seeing that they're looking for more sites. On Wednesday, the city asked the governor to order other districts and other municipalities to take on these migrants. And, you know, behind the scenes, we've heard from my National Guard sources that they've been setting up all these sites and then keep shifting on where they're going or where they're going to be assigned. And it, as it is with Floyd Bennett Field, it just doesn't seem like anything is actually written down in paper and officially yet.
The governor has to sign off on that, right? And she's been a little slow in allowing movement. And why do you think that is?
Well, I would say because it's a political hot football. I mean, outside of New York City, there's not a lot of political will. I mean, even in New York City, you had last week a group of bipartisan lawmakers led by Congresswoman Malliotakis, Republican, but also Democrats were there too, saying, when is enough is enough? I mean, you're taking our parks, you're taking our rec centers, you're taking our open spaces. It's like, we're generous, this is a country of immigrants, but where does it end? And that's a fair question at this point. Where does it end?
I mean, the city's saying 3,000 migrants arrived last week, right? There is no end in sight. And they keep talking about the dam being broken. Let's get them to work. Work authorization, though, Craig, that's the big problem.
Right, and that comes from the federal government.
Right.
And early this week, when they had the briefing on the asylum seekers, it's where they bang the drum again. They keep asking for the work authorization. And they say that that is a way to get us past this, because then they could provide, they could send money back to their families, and then that's the way the immigration process would then typically work.
But the city was also slow in just doing the regular asylum process, which now, a year and a few months in, might have paid some dividends with some temporary permits. The comptroller Lander, Public Advocate Williams were hammering the Adams administration, start the paperwork now, because this is going to drag on. They were right, and the paperwork was not started soon enough.
To be continued. Let's talk about where else the mayor was last week, and that was Israel. We had the chief of patrol on earlier talking about some new technology they were looking at in Israel, including drones. Craig, you've done some reporting right now. Let's talk first about the mayor's trip and why he decided to go overseas. Some said the timing was odd, that it may have been a PR stunt.
Well, I think pundits believe that this was to woo voters, Jewish voters at home. This was a very, I mean, he thrust himself into a political turmoil in that country where the judicial reforms is facing significant backlash. And it was interesting him meeting with people on both sides, and he had to walk a political tightrope. He didn't take opinion either way, at least publicly with reporters, and we really don't know much details of the conversations or the exhibits he saw, except for something on drones and police, and then also lab-grown meat.
Okay. But the idea, because the mayor, that was an interesting point about wooing some of the voters, but the mayor saying, hey, this was about big tech. What exactly is he going to Israel for in terms of big tech? What do they have that maybe New York City doesn't? Well,
that's the question, Dan, and I'm not going to pretend that I have the answer. I mean, you can bring, if the mayor remotely expressed interest in any company anywhere in the entire world and said, we've got a New York City contract for you, they would be on the next plane from wherever. So it really is hard to say that this was about technology. Now, I'm not disputing the fact that he met with some of these companies. I mean, it absolutely happened, and we'll see what the results of those meetings were. But to say it was for that, or that you needed to go there for that, it doesn't even pass the smell test.
Yeah, but there is some interesting reporting that you did, Craig, in your former position over with the NYPD, taking a look at some of the drone technology, which Chief Shell talked about, right? And it's this high-tech drone technology that uses infrared that could possibly be on the scene before a police officer. But there were some civil liberties unions that were saying, well, it could kind of infringe people's rights.
Yeah, I think it also comes down to policy and procedure when they implement these things. And I don't know if the privacy advocates have been in the room for these conversations. That's typically always their point of contention. There's a California town that's already doing this, where they've been doing this since 2018, using these as first responders. I think the question with privacy always comes in: when is it recording? How is it recording? What kind of tech is facial recognition being used? And in Israel specifically, where they're looking at all of this tech, the police there face blowback for using facial recognition and biometrics on Palestinians. So I think that was also brought up on his trip there too when he looked at that tech.
All right, Henry and Craig, great to have both of you here.